Hello everyone, I'm Susanda Njinga and welcome to On the Couch. Hey guys, so today I'll be chatting to Emma Warren, who is a journalist and a radio host from the UK. Emma is an incredible storyteller and is also the author of a book called Make Some Space, which documents a space in London called the Total Refreshment Centre. And the book also touches on how community spaces can create culture. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. All the better for speaking with your fine self.
Ooh. So before we get into the book and the work that you're doing now, can you just please give us a brief background about yourself and your journey in storytelling and how you found yourself in the space that you're in now?
Now this is an interesting question because particularly use of the word storyteller, because I think I am operating in that lineage, but there's such an absence of clarity about the importance of that role in so many Western European countries. So very few people would call themselves storytellers unless they're working in the realm of, telling children's stories, or if they're coming from more an explicitly kind of griot type of tradition. So I'm really happy that you use the word storyteller, because I think I am operating in that lineage, and I recognise the value of story, and story as virus, story as positive virus. So I'm happy to be thought of in that way. I came more from a journalism background. I was a music writer for a long time, and then somehow I made this evolution from journalist to writer, and I think that's to do with being embedded in communities that are generating culture, wanting to contribute, and recognising that I could contribute through my writing and through my telling of their story.
Mm-hmm. And when did you realize that you had a love for storytelling? When did it all start? Like when did you decide, I think I could write and I think I could tell stories?
Well, I knew as soon as I kind of got involved in music culture, I recognised that I was experiencing it different from other people. So if I was in a club or a dance of some kind, I was absorbing lots of information, and I felt a desire to synthesize that information somehow, to be able to communicate something about what it meant. Because I recognized from a very young age that these places had value, but I also knew that most people didn't understand it. My family didn't understand it. Most of my friends didn't understand it. And so I figured that I could do a job of explanation and of articulation. And that's what I've really honed in on over the last couple of years. Make Some Space and the pamphlet I wrote about Steam Down. And all the things I'm working on at the moment are about surfacing the things that we know intuitively and trying to find ways to articulate them, particularly in areas that are not considered culturally valuable or not considered to have high cultural value.
And how do you do that? Like, how do you move from a space of, because when you call yourself a journalist, right, you're expected to write about specific things in a specific way. So if you're a music journalist, you're supposed to write about artists and their music in a specific way. That's what people are used to. How did you move from writing about music in that way to how you're doing it now? And what's the importance in that, in realizing that you can write about things in ways that are not necessarily traditional?
Yes. Now, this is interesting because I think as a music journalist, you are quite constrained by some of the assumptions about how you do it, particularly questions of objectivity and subjectivity, and the feeling that you must have some removed from the story in order to be able to tell it properly. And I came from a beginning of not doing it properly, because myself and my friends just started a magazine. So we didn't know how to do it properly, we just did it. And then when I started to work for proper publications, like I had a staff job on a kind of well-known sort of style magazine called The Face, I had to learn how to do things properly. And that was kind of useful in some ways, but I never did things that properly because I was always coming from a position of championing things and wanting to share them and wanting to kind of explain why amazing things are amazing that might not appear to be valuable. But there was a point where I stopped being a full-time music journalist, but I didn't stop being part of music cultures. And it was at that point that I kind of unlearned the properness And I remembered that actually what I like to do is to be part of a community and from within to tell the stories of it. So I feel like we all have this possibility to tell the story in the way it needs to be told. Sometimes you might need to learn a bit of technique here or there, but you can unlearn it too, and the unlearning can be as important as the learning. What I unlearned after having worked on proper magazines was really formative.
Tell me about the unlearning process, because as somebody who is a journalist myself, I understand what you're saying about, kind of putting yourself out as a journalist. I also feel like I'm a journalist, yes, by profession, but I feel like I'm a storyteller because I tell stories in different formats now. So can you talk to me about the unlearning? How do you unlearn the things that you are told? This is in order for you to be successful in the job that you're doing or in the work that you're doing, you have to do things this specific way. How do you unlearn the things that you're told are what make you?
I think the first question that you have to ask yourself in the unlearning process is, what am I for? Or what is my story in service of? Now, for me, when I was working on what I'm calling proper publications, The Face, contributing to newspapers like The Guardian and The Observer, you are supposedly in service of the reader. But what I realised actually is much of the work I'm interested in doing is in service of the music, in service of the culture, in service of the community. And so a process of relearning who my editors are took place. So in this case, my editor wasn't necessarily the person who'd commissioned me at a music publication to write a story. My editors were actually the people I was writing about, which is different to sending a musician a piece of copy beforehand for approval. What it means is that you recognise that by documenting culture, you're putting people under your pen. And you might not have that completely right unless you check with them. So I began to take the process of fact-checking a little broader than I ever had before. And that would mean being transparent with people about what I was doing and what I was saying, so that they could tell me whether or not I'd mangled anything, whether or not I'd just got something completely wrong. And so what felt like, in journalistic terms, that would be like giving someone copy approval, right? We wouldn't do that. I'm not giving people approval. I'm saying explicitly, this is not for approval, but I just want to check I've got this right. This is what I'm saying. This is where I've started with the story. This is the context I've given. This is what I've said about you. And often I'd got something slightly wrong, just slightly wrong. And so this was an opportunity to correct it. And nobody ever said to me, I don't sound good saying that, or I don't sound that. Or if they did, I'd just push back and say, well, you did say it, and it's an important quote, and this is why. So acting kind of in concert with people as opposed to extracting cultural material is how I started, and I just had to remember that that's actually how I want to operate. I'm not extracting cultural material for a dispassionate audience. I'm part of the community of which I tell story.
So you're touching on how you came to write this book, right? So can you tell us about Make Your Space and why you think it's important to document someone's culture? And I think the way that you've done it is in honor of the people that you're talking about and the culture that you're talking about. Can you take me through that? Why firstly, did you think it was important to create a book like Make Some Space, and how did you go about doing it?
The first part of the question, why did I think it was important? I realised, and this is partly a quote I heard from a drummer called Femi Kolioso, that it's important to document things while they're happening, before they're dry, before they're dead and finished, because things have a very different quality while they're happening than they do afterwards. When something is closed, and I don't just mean a venue, I mean a closed book, once an era is over, it feels like a quantifiable moment, and we can project a whole load of other things onto it. Ideas about how we wished it had been, or irritations with it. you lose some accuracy once something has been enclosed and turned into a finite portion of history. Whereas in the everyday, you capture a feeling about it, or a response to a thing, or a relationship to a thing, which reflects how we experience it. It's kind of obvious. But often documentation of things happens when things have become, when things are in the past. Now, the past has, I think, a couple of very specific effects on cultural stories. It makes them safer. So the passage of time can knock out certain important people from a story, and it can also make a story safe. So often you find people writing about cultural community that they wouldn't have gone to had they been alive at the time. So the example I use in the book is people often like to write about these particular nightclubs in New York in the 70s and 80s, particularly places like the Loft and the Paradise Garage. Now, the truth is, if you were going to go to those places, you would have been black or brown and a queer man, almost certainly. Now, if you're so interested in writing about them, the question to ask yourself is, would I have gone if I could have gone at the time? And if you wouldn't have gone, then maybe there's someone else better placed to tell that story.
I like that.
So this is why some of the questions about doing historical work, I think, is a bit dodgy sometimes, because you can put yourself as a writer into places that you wouldn't actually have gone. Now, for me as a writer, choosing to focus on places that I have gone, do go to, am going to, I'm negating that risk. I mean, I'm bringing in other risks, but I feel like there's something honest about using the material you have around you to tell your story, rather than searching for something elsewhere in time or space.
Speaking of relationships with spaces and with places, right? What is your relationship with the Total Refreshment Center, and why was the story of this specific space important to you to tell? Why not any other space? Why the Total Refreshment Center?
My relationship with Total Refreshment Center is that as soon as I walked in, I just wanted to go back. And I just made sure I went back as much as I could, because I'd been around for so long now that I know when you walk into a special place. I know the qualities of a special place. I know it's very obvious to me when you go into those places. And I know they're rare, and I know they don't last very long. And so I just wanted to go back. The music was excellent. It was a fascinating place. I felt like I was in a time machine. What can I say? I recognised it immediately.
And of all the spaces that you've been to, because I know you've been to a lot of spaces, you are a culturalist. You're like somebody who digs out culture and who you find amazing spaces and amazing people and amazing stories. Why this specific center?
But I didn't plan to write the book. This is the thing. It was an accident. It happened kind of by the by. The idea originally was just to do a fanzine, because I was standing outside the Total Refreshment Centre one evening. It was one of the first times I'd spoken to Lex, who ran the place, and he said to me, it's all over, the building's been sold, we've got to get out of here. And I was like, that's terrible, but let's document it while it's still here. We'll do a 10-page fanzine, we'll do an oral history, we'll just interview people, and then we'll just sell it at the final weekend, which at that point was 2 or 3 months away, so that's enough time to bang out a little, 28-page fanzine. Or 10 pages, I think I said in the beginning. Let's do a 10-page fanzine. But then the sale fell through. So suddenly I'd begun this process of working out who to talk to, starting to talk to people, and recognising that actually there was a story here that was much deeper than I'd first anticipated, but there was no need to do a 10-page fanzine. So then I just kind of took it upon myself to just carry on researching it with a view to turning it into a bigger pamphlet. And then it kind of, as the story revealed itself to me, I realised that actually there was a short book's worth of material in here. And I carried on gathering material until it was closed down by the council one day in June a couple of years ago. And at that point, I moved out of gather mode and into make mode, but I moved into make mode from the position of wanting to protect it and help get it back open again. So it was kind of campaigning, I suppose. It had a kind of quality of like activism about it, because I was actively trying to help the process of get it unclosed, and then the process of actually finishing the book took another 6 months or so. So it wasn't that I walked into this place and I knew that it was a place that I had to write a book about. I went into a place, I became a kind of part of the broader community. I decided to do a thing which grew into a much bigger thing, which ended up being the book.
So from what I'm hearing, like spaces like the Total Refreshment Center, right, are spaces that nurture relationships and they bring people together, right? How do you think we'll still be able to create those human interactions post-COVID? I think that's something that I think about a lot now. I'm like, I know that the reason spaces like Total Refreshment Center don't exist anymore is because of gentrification, and there are lots of spaces that we're losing to that. But now the bigger question is, that's not the only thing that we're fighting now, or the only thing that we're faced with. So post-COVID, how do you think we'll still manage to have those human connections?
I mean, this is a huge question, and I've been thinking about it a lot as well. I feel like we will re-enter the post-COVID world, or the during COVID world, with many changes. Many of our venues will just not have made it through. Many of us will have new anxieties about being in social spaces. So you have a kind of dropping off of lots of things, a dropping off of physical space, because places won't make it through, and a dropping off of people who are able to do this very human thing of gathering. And that's going to take some time to work itself out. No doubt people will come up with some inventive solutions. I think there'll be a kind of return to the sort of home-based socialising. People just doing little jams in their basements and front rooms, of which there is a great tradition in music and culture, right? You think of the Irish shebeen, or the kind of Afro-Caribbean shebeen. The Irish word, and actually in the kind of Afro-Caribbean word, is used to describe the same thing, or a blues, as we would call it. So I think there'll be a kind of rebuilding from the most grassroots environment, which is our homes. I think people might need to be inventive about how they manage in this interim period. Maybe we'll go to gigs where there are shower curtains around us, or masks on the door. I don't know, but certainly it's not just the lack of space here, it's the confidence that we have in being in proximity to our fellow people, and that's going to take some time to heal. But we are a communal species, and we do need places to gather, and we will continue to need that. So I feel like a useful thing to do at this point is to continue to advocate for why they're important, because it's not recognised in the mainstream that these places matter. And so I want to contribute to an articulation and explanation and advocating for, places like, it's Kitchener's, isn't it?
Yeah.
Places like that. Nobody necessarily can explain why they're so important, or why they're as important as an opera house or a ballet company, but they are that important. So I'm on a little bit of investigation myself about how I can contribute to this, given what I've learned about how we articulate. And I actually think, maybe Sandy, you can tell me about language here, because in some of the languages you speak, you may have a word for this, but I know in English we don't have a word to describe a love of place. So I can describe intimate relationships, I can describe my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my best friend, but I can't describe my place friend. And yet a building can be beloved, a building can break your heart. We can have these strong emotional connections with place, but we don't have any language for it. So do you have any words in any of your languages that would describe that feeling?
I would think, ooh, that's a hard one. I would think the word that comes to mind for me is imbo or embo, which is a place where people kind of go together and to be together. Yeah, for now that's the only space that that's the only word that I can actually think of that speaks to that. Embo, which is a place where you'd kind of go communally together and to be together. Yeah.
Which language is that in?
It's Nguni. It's Nguni, so it's Zulu and Xhosa.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So as I hear you talking about like the importance of documenting these spaces, right? And as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking of a lot of spaces that have come and gone, not even the spaces that exist now. Like when I think about, early 90s, Yeovil in Johannesburg, spaces like Tandor, where a lot of things were birthed, a lot of young Kwaito musicians came out of that space, and there was just such a sense of community and love. And I don't think and I know there are spaces that exist now, but I don't think we'll ever really have spaces like that because of the time, right? It was just after democracy, we were all really excited, and we all finally had our voices. I was really, really young at the time, but I had the opportunity to go to these spaces because my best friend's sister was a journalist. And now that you talk about it, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what a shame that we don't have anything that really speaks to that time, and it isn't really documented. But how would you encourage other people to then document their culture? And like, how does one even begin? Like, where do you start? If I'm like sitting here thinking, I think there are spaces and there are places that should never be forgotten, how do I go about documenting that?
But before that, we have to understand why it's important to create this bedrock of stories. Why is it important? Well, it's so that we understand that we're acting in a great and long lineage, and that people have been doing this forever, and that we're not alone. Because I think a lot of people, when a place comes up, like these places you're talking about, which sound amazing, it's like that's the only time it's ever happened, and that's the only place it's ever existed, and it would never be like this again. Well, of course, this moment, this COVID moment, what a moment! I mean, it's never happened before. It's completely unique. We'll be having unique experiences. There will never be a time like this again, but you could say that of any moment in time. So I think before we talk about how we capture these stories, we need to understand why it's important. So the act of articulation is important because it gives us language to be able to explain why these places are valuable, that it's not just like hedonistic place for young people to go off and do disposable things, that these are places where culture is generated, where relationships are made, where people can come alive, extraordinarily valuable places. So the articulation matters, the collection of the stories matter, because then we suddenly have critical mass. We say, these places didn't just happen once in early 90s, Cape Town or Joburg. These places have happened all over the world forever. These are essentially human things to do. And here is our evidence. And look at all these joyful stories, and suddenly it doesn't just become one place which a few people went to. It becomes a universe of places. It becomes a cosmos of places which are all interconnected and which belong in a lineage. And I think it's very empowering to imagine yourself with lineage behind you and all those people that ran all those places cheering you on, and actually having valuable information for you as well about how they did it and the challenges they faced, or even that it's possible. So I feel like the act of gathering the story is important because it gives us permission through possibility. We know it can be done, so maybe we'll do it too. You asked though about how we do it, and I've just the final chapter of Make Some Space is called Document Your Culture, and in it I explain how I wrote the book. And a lot of people have been in touch with me since then, asking me about these Document Your Culture workshops that I've been running as what I describe as the tax that I owed the story.
Yes.
Really amazing to do, and I got so much out of it. People have been in touch, so I've been thinking, what can I do about this? So I've started making a new pamphlet. It would be like 28 pages, and it's called Document Your Space, or Document Your... I haven't really finished the title yet. But it's basically a guide to why you might want to tell the story of your cultural space. Could be a youth club, could be the place that you talked about, could be Total Refreshment Centre. And then kind of like 10-point guide on how the practicalities of how you do it. And then at the end, some questions that you might want to ask yourself. So hopefully what I make will contribute to our knowledge about how we do this thing.
This sounds like another awesome book. I'm hoping that it's also going to turn into a book. Just saying, because wow.
Workbook. It's more of a workbook though. It's more of a like, you know, you want to do a thing and you just need someone who can give you a few pointers. It's that really.
I'm excited because I think I found myself just sitting and thinking about how does one do that? You really got me amped up. You really made me feel like anybody can tell stories about spaces and about anything really. But I think something that you touched on a lot was while you were putting this book together, you worked with a lot of different people around you. How important is collaboration when you're putting together things that speak to culture?
It's everything. It's everything. You can't make culture by yourself. What makes you think you can document it by yourself? It's dead. I've got this idea. I tried to explain it to someone the other day about this is a kind of unworked up metaphor, so you'll have to allow me a little bit of space to get it right. But I'm asking you to imagine something like when people make their own bread, right? They bring the kind of their biome with it, and so the microbes that I carry on my body, around me, in my household, are unique to me. Same with you. And so if I make some bread, I'm going to be putting some of my microbes into it, and so are you. Not germs, we're just talking about like things which are unique to us. A loaf of bread that I make in my kitchen is going to have a kind of a signature which is like me, as is yours. Now, that's alive, right? And if we compare that, and hold on, this doesn't quite work. Because I was going to compare it to ketchup, which is dead. But the metaphor doesn't really carry, because what I'm trying to explain is culture happens when new material is added to it.
I hear you. I totally understand you. I actually, as much as the bread metaphor doesn't make sense, it makes me understand what you're trying to say even more. It's about your essence that you're adding onto it as well, and the importance of that, your you-ness that you add onto it. Yeah.
That's actually not a question of collaboration. That's a question of bringing yourself, which I think is a different thing, which is also important. You do have to bring yourself to it, because culture is made through the revelation of something personal, right? The transmission of something which is uniquely you. If it's not going to be good. And so as the documenter, you must do some of that as well. And that is actually quite painful. It's not easy to reveal something of yourself, but I feel like you must do that in order for the work to be good. So I've answered a different question there. Maybe just on collaboration, I would say that all ideas are improved by giving them the oxygen of conversation and the oxygen of collaboration. Even if it's just having someone to bounce ideas off. But I think collaborating through the whole process is really useful. I found a designer who was from the Total Refreshment Centre community to design it. I found photographers from within the community. I worked with people in and around the building on early drafts of it. It's like, this is what I'm thinking about saying. Have I missed anything? And again, this wasn't a like, red pen it, approve it. It was, tell me what I've missed. And I've missed loads of things. So it became much more accurate and complete by taking in the input of the people around it, rather than just doing it all myself and then revealing it like, this is the thing I've made, it's finished. Nah. The people needed to be in it all the way through, even in the kind of behind the scenes bit, as much as they needed to be in the story named on page 63 or whatever.
And how much more important is collaboration now, like in the times of COVID? Like, how important is collaborating with people on the things that you do in the space that we find ourselves in now?
Well, maybe the collaboration is part of how we will regain confidence in proximity. because, you know, we have all got new anxieties about being around our fellow humans, haven't we?
Yep.
All of us. You know, I saw a t-shirt the other day, you know, like the phrase, I don't know if it's the same in South Africa, but people have been using this phrase, stay well. So it's like how people sign off emails. It's like,
I'm guilty of that. Yeah.
So this t-shirt says on the front, stay well, and on the back it says, away from me. Stay well away from me. And so perhaps collaboration and beginning to work together in smaller groups will give us that confidence that actually, you know, it's fine. There may be this long extended period where we're having to be much more careful about our interactions and much more responsible about what we do with ourselves if we're unwell, to avoid catching and to avoid transmitting. But, you know, we're not the only community that's ever had to deal with this. I wonder how people managed during the AIDS epidemic to rebuild trust and proximity and human contact at a time when the most intimate of human contact could cause you to die and cause so many people to die. So, you know, there are people who've figured some things out. I wonder about the communities that suffered from Ebola in the past and still. How did they manage to like rebuild and repair? So we don't have to invent everything from scratch. There'll be plenty of people who know more than we do, who we can look to for advice and guidance.
And I'm loving that you're touching on this fear that we all have, right? It kind of reminds me of the fear that everybody who creates has, right? When it comes to putting stuff out. It's wonderful, it's all great and wonderful when you create stuff and you think, oh, this is so wonderful, everybody's going to love it. But then comes the taking it out and having everybody kind of look at it and see it, right? And I think a lot of us creators have that fear in us when we create things. How does one get over the fear of just getting work out? Because I can imagine when you create something as big as Make Your Space, right, which kind of incorporates a lot of different experiences, there must have been a little bit of fear of, oh my gosh, should I really take this out? As a creator, what does one do to get over the fear of just getting your work out?
You can't get over it. It is there. And it is strong. I was so frightened before I put Make Some Space out. And I was terrified when it came back from print. The day it came back from print, it was raining. They all arrived at my house. I was like, what have I done? Why have I done this? Oh my God. I felt like a mother who had desperately wanted a child. And then when it was born, was like, who are you? And what are you going to do to me? I don't even know if I like the way you look. But you're here now, and you might ruin my life. I can't describe how frightening it was, because the act of creation is the act of life making. And then suddenly you've given life to a thing which you have a lifelong relationship with, and it might ruin your life. It might amplify your life. In fact, it's probably going to do a bit of both. Because, you know, anytime you invite a new life into your life, through birth or through family, kind of, you know, whatever, anytime you do that, things change because there's a new entity around. And it is fundamentally terrifying. But if it wasn't, then you're probably not doing it right. Because it comes back to this act of revealing. If you reveal something of yourself, that is precious, and you don't know how that's going to be taken. And it costs. It has actually quite a high cost, but it also has a great return. And I really felt the cost when I put Make Some Space out. You know, I'm talking about walking down the street. I spent months actually in a quite an extreme sort of psychological state that was not healthy at all. But so that was a cost. I think it stressed me out more than anything I've ever done. I felt constantly like I was falling off a cliff. It was deeply unpleasant and testing time. But the benefit has been immense. And if I put less of myself in it, I would have got less out. And I had to be really coaxed into putting more of myself in it because I didn't want to do it. I had some good editor friends who were just like, don't give me crumbs. You need to put more of yourself in it. And I forced myself to do it, and it was worth it.
That's awesome, Emma. That's yeah. I think a lot of people, whenever I ask people this question about fear, they're like, oh, just do it. And I don't think they talk about fear and how paralyzing fear can be when you create stuff. So thank you for actually sharing the process of actually doing it and going through the fear and what it looks like. Because I don't think a lot of people think about what fear can mean for somebody who's created something and wants to share. And what would you say has been since creating Make Your Space, what has been your biggest inspiration? Like what is keeping you going? Because I feel like you are now on a roll. I'm really excited about Document Your Space, and I really think it's going to be another awesome book that you're really not aware of. So what's kept you going? Like after the book came out, what made you just keep creating? Because I feel like you are constantly creating now.
People responded to it, and they responded to it strong. They responded to it with like in a heartfelt way, and that keeps me going. And I get messages frequently from people who tell me that the book has helped them understand their relationship to a place they loved. It's made them feel like they can do something, and the fact that it's so magical, isn't it? That I can have a thought and I can have all this accumulated knowledge from all these years I've spent in these places, and deciding it's my job to sort of surface all this information. That I can have an idea and that I can put it in a book, and it can jump across the world, across town and city, and it can enter into other people's consciousness, and it can make them feel like they can do something. And the whole point of it was to make people feel like they didn't just have the agency, that actually we need people to contribute in the way that they can. And for that signal to have been received and acted on and passed on is amazing to me. It's the best possible thing that could happen, for people to say, oh, do you know what? I've realised now my stories matter, and I'm going to do something with that. So that is the ultimate. That's the ultimate kind of motivator.
I think one thing about you is that you're constantly evolving. Like, you make it seem easy and okay to evolve, right? And I think storytelling has also evolved over the years. People are telling stories very differently now. How easy has it for you to keep adapting with the times, and how have you managed to also just keep that Emma-ness? How do you keep being Emma, but yet creating stories in such different ways, but also make it so Emma?
Well, I'm very flattered, thank you, that you would say those things, but I'm also intrigued by your use of the word evolve there, because I've been thinking a lot about this recently, about how do you continue to evolve? Because if you don't, we see this a lot in the UK with middle-aged men who were fairly open-minded at one point in their life, and then suddenly they hit middle age and they become reactionary, and they become pro, our own kind of countrywide drama of Brexit. They become Brexity, they become anti-immigration, and they become very hardened into some very reactionary attitudes. And I think it's to do with a failure to evolve. It's a failure to remain connected to what's happening, a failure to remain open to learning, and a failure to update your reality. And I feel like this concept of updating your reality is really important. And you do that, you can't actually do that alone. You also need other people around you to help you update your reality, because otherwise you can keep on thinking that you're 30 years old. I'm thinking about these middle-aged men who are probably like 50. They haven't updated their reality. I am a 50-year-old man, and the world I live in is different than the world I lived in when I was 25. and this is where I fit in it, and this is what is useful, and this is what is not so good, and ow, my knees hurt, but look at all the wisdom I've got. So for me, I've come to realise that updating my reality as regularly as I can, sometimes by myself and sometimes with the help of people around me, I can remain as much myself as I can be, the me that exists now rather than the me that was, 5 years ago or 20 years ago or whatever. This is like my current me-ness is as maximally me as it can be because I've updated my reality.
And I am loving your meanness. I've always loved your meanness, but like I'm loving it even more. I keep telling you, like every time I speak to you, I feel like you are growing and evolving, and I don't even know how that's possible, because the last time I would have spoken to you, I'd be like, oh my goodness, Emma, I can't believe you've done this. And then I speak to you again and I'm like, how does she keep doing it? How does she keep finding stuff that is relevant to do? Even during COVID. And I want to know from you, is that maybe you can help me. Is there something that you do, or do you have like a daily routine that you are doing now during COVID that keeps you creating? Is there like a routine that you have, or are you just winging it?
Well, I'm winging it. I'm definitely winging it. There's no routine. Any routine I had is like gone. And some days are easier than other days. But I feel like, we have so much to learn from each other. I have loads to learn from you. You have loads to learn from me. I know what I know. You know what you know. And between us, we know quite a lot. So I can't rely on routine because it's not really happening at the moment. I can't rely on being out and about because that's not happening at the moment. But I can rely on being open to other people's experience and to a high degree of empathy and ability to connect. So I wish I did have a daily routine because it might make things easier. I wish that I was doing all those lovely healthy things, but I'm not really. But what I am doing still is talking to people and absorbing information and reading the poets and talking to people.
Tell me, what are you reading and what are you listening to? Most importantly, like what's on your playlist? Like what are you listening to right now and what are you reading?
Well, actually, even though I say I'm reading, I'm actually reading more poets than novelists. I tried to read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, but it's so horrendously relevant for now that I was like, I can't actually put myself through it, even though the genius is obviously of the highest level. I found it too painful to imagine ourselves in that world right now, but I will come back to it. I read an amazing science fiction book that was published last year, which is called Song for a New Day, which is set in a post-virus world in which gigs are banned. And all live music has been taken over by an Amazon, Walmart type company called Stage Hollow, who do these virtual reality massive stadium concerts and who purposefully suck up and destroy grassroots culture in order to maintain their monopoly. So it's ridiculously prescient and well worth the read. And I just dip in and out of the poets. So Sharon Olds, Roger Robinson. Sharon Olds is American, Roger Robinson is UK. There's Belinda Jawi, who's a young London poet. I just love the poets. They have so much to tell us. But listening, oh my God, so much, so many different music. It would be easier actually if I could show you the stack of records that I've got over there. I have someone with excellent music taste in my household at the moment, and so he's bringing all kinds of really incredible things, from like very beautiful Japanese ambient music to weird ass techno records to I don't know, like rare Tony Allen records. Not rare Tony Allen records, but kind of niche, for the heads Tony Allen records. So he's kind of got this incredible knowledge of music from the past, and I'm always interested in new music that's coming out. So kind of between us we have a sort of past, present, future continuum of lots and lots and lots and lots of very active listening going on. So yeah, listening to like vast amounts of music every day. It's great.
That's awesome. I love your playlist, and I don't think I've met anybody who has such a vast understanding of music in different genres. Like, you can go from trance to baqanga to rave and like easily. You are that person.
No trance.
No trance.
No trance. But again, I know what I know, and you know what you know, and you know your depth of knowledge. All of our knowledge and the things we know about is a lot. So I'm just, it's always good to be able to find out what other people are bringing. I know what I like. It's like your home cooking, isn't it? Like, you know what you like. Lovely, delicious, even made it myself. But it's always nice to eat what someone else brings as well to the table, and it's the same with music. So I need some recommendations from you actually as well, please. If you and I start talking about music, we'll talk about music the whole thing. This is one of the reasons I appreciate you in my life, because you are like my biggest music plug. You are a plug. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you 2 questions that you usually ask of your audiences at your workshops, right? What do you want people to do after they come across what you make? And what do you want people to feel after they come across what you make? Okay, so with anything that I make, I want people to feel, and this is both actually, I want them to feel that their stories matter. I want them to feel like they have permission to tell their stories however they see fit, and I want them to do it. I just want people to do it. Just do it. It doesn't have to be big or special or grand or have a big effect. You can just show your grandma. Do you know what I mean? It can be that small, but your grandma is gonna love it. She'll be like, oh wow, you've made this beautiful thing, and then you have that reflected kind of happiness and pleasure of having done a thing. And if you show it to someone who might give you a job, well, it's gonna make your CV look different. Maybe your CV doesn't look that great on the surface. Maybe it does, I don't know. But if you show them a thing you've made, I made a thing, suddenly it transcends the kind of material information about how you did at school or what your responsibilities were in your last job. So on a very practical level, doing it can provide a bridge into different things. But it just feels good after it stopped feeling terrifying.
Emma, you are amazing. You are awesome. You inspire me. You inspire me. You inspire me. You inspire me. And thank you so much for giving us a piece of yourself through the work that you do. I really appreciate you, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait for Document Your Space, because I think there are things in there that I can learn that can let me and help me let go of the fear and just put stuff out. So thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being Emma.
It's my pleasure. So when are you going to do your story about early 90s clubs?
There she goes. There she goes again.
I look forward to seeing you in the reel at some point in the future.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
In the meantime, hug.
Hug. I miss you. I love you. And thank you for being you.
Thank you for being you. Thank you.